Let you know a little bit about myself. I grew up in Hialeah, Florida. Went to Chicago to go to college. Spent 20 years on staff with one church, but in different roles. And just 3 years ago, moved back to Miami. One of the most powerful experiences I had was leading a youth ministry that was based on small groups. Now that I've been back here in Florida and I've visited a lot of churches and I've sat through a lot of youth breakout small groups, I've begun to wonder, is small groups really effective? I mean, come on, think about it. Like, it's hard enough to get a volunteer. To volunteer every week, pour time into youth, to actually show up. I mean, there's other needs, right? There's the sound tech. There's, hey, if you have any snacks, you need that volunteer to serve some food. I mean, you need somebody to sign in. And, if you're going to do your presentation, somebody to run PowerPoint, and you're thinking about all the needs, like it's hard enough just to get the bare minimum of volunteers. How in the world are we going to get enough volunteers for small groups? We think about really we look at Christianity, we look at the kids we're producing that are graduating and think, wow, like they're biblically illiterate, like they're shallow in their faith. Like, do they just need to really sit around and talk about how they feel, their highs and lows, and like, really, don't they need to get deeper in the Word? Don't they need a longer Bible study? I mean, we've taken Sunday morning and made it more milk than meat, and then now you go to small group and it's a lot of discussion time. It's like, when are they ever going to learn the Bible, right? And so we're thinking like, man, this small group movement isn't really effective. And we actually think like, most youth groups, they don't have volunteers to do small groups on one night and youth group on another night. And so often small groups and youth ministry is a breakout time. And so you have some game time, maybe you do a couple songs, you have some teaching. And if your youth leader is a great speaker and a powerful preacher, it feels powerful, emotional, and they, maybe 15 minutes is left over for smaller group, 30 minutes at best. And if you have 15 kids sitting around, 30 minutes, I mean, what could really happen? I mean, that's 2 minutes each of talking. Really, that doesn't even often happen. A lot of times they'll be junior high kids and you're like rehashing the message to them. You didn't get it? Oh, let me explain this. And then the leader just gives them a whole nother sermon. It's like, why not just, why, are the small groups really effective? And a lot of times they end up just being an afterthought. Maybe the problem isn't that our small groups aren't effective or that small groups aren't effective. Maybe the way we've treated small groups has made them ineffective. Think about it. How much time do we put into the lesson? We put a lot of time. Think about how much money we invest in sound equipment, lights. But how much time do we put into small groups? How much money do we invest in our small group leaders? How much do we really believe by the way we invest time and money in our small groups? And then when it comes to like the way we recruit, we're like, hey, here's a sheet of paper, I'll give you the questions. We give it to them the night of. They don't even know what topic we're talking about or what questions they're going to be asking until they get there. And it's like an afterthought. And we take the breakout groups and maybe we really deep down and believe inside, like, man, a 45-minute sermon, they would get a lot of teaching, but they don't have that long of an attention span. And so we'll do a short message and then just let them talk with a leader, and at least we'll hopefully catch any emergencies. And we treat these like groups like breakouts as afterthoughts. And that's why I visited youth groups, think like, whoa, they are a little bit ineffective. But small groups that we're seeing may be ineffective, but the problem may not be the method. The problem may not be the strategy of small groups within youth. The problem may be how little time we've actually invested in our small group leaders. You see, if you think about all the conferences pastors go to and seminary and Bible college, and you think about all the videos and things we watch on YouTube, and how much time do we actually spend investing in our small group leadership? What if leaders led very effective small groups and we just need to supply more training, supply more, not just recruit to say, hey, we're just recruiting you because we need you to maybe be a bouncer, and small groups are the most important thing we do in our youth ministry. What if really the problem isn't the value and how we do our training and how we treat our small group ministry within the youth group. You see, I believe small groups are ministry. I've pastored a youth group that grew to 440 youth, meeting in multiple locations, having hundreds of youth in small groups, trips where we took 440 youth from Chicago to Detroit. And in that youth ministry, the greatest impact happened in our small groups. It wasn't when I was speaking. It wasn't on these trips. I mean, the trips, that was building small group time, retreats, building small group relationships so that the small groups became more effective. It wasn't just these sermons. It was the relationships and the intentionality and the missional aspect of our small groups that made them so, so powerful. And so I firmly know beyond a shadow of a doubt that small groups are the most important part of your youth ministry, and training your small group leaders is the most important job of a student ministry director. Job is recruiting, building, and a team that would love, invest, and build in youth. You say, why? Why would small groups be the most important thing? Well, leader, right? And the greatest leader we ever known who's lived was Jesus. And Jesus, he didn't have 13 disciples. He didn't have 14 disciples. He appointed 12 to be his closest disciples. 12 that he would minister to the crowds, but he invested more of his time in small groups. In the Bible, when you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Dan Spader counted over. He was spending time with his 12. And only in the 10 to 20 ratio where he's spending time with his time with his small group than he did with the crowds by that ratio. Now, let me encourage you this. This is, you make disciples from a stage only. You can't. You may impress somebody from, but you can't somebody's life from a stage. You can't. You can't make disciples from the stage. And so if Jesus, disciples group, when he told us to go and make disciples, the most effective way to do that is in the context of a community, of a small group. And if you want to make disciples, if you want to obey the Great Commission, you have to do that in smaller ratios. And you want to disciple more than 12, you need a team of leaders that you're training to lead small groups and to disciple others. You can't make without a small group. And secondly, you can't raise leaders without a relationship. In Mark chapter 3, verse 14, it says he appointed that he could spend time with them and so that he could send them out. So Jesus, when he was appointing the 12, he had two purposes that are listed. Spend time with them, and he wanted to send them out. And so we don't see youth grow to leadership levels where they're being in small groups. You have relationships, and you can't have discipleship without relationship. And as you have that relationship developed, you're able to identify and be eventually be on mission living for him. But you don't go from being a lukewarm accident becoming a missional disciple, a disciple out on mission. That doesn't just happen accidentally. That takes intentionality. And so eventually able to send them out. And so you won't raise leaders without relationships. And so even if you're the student, primary responsibility is your small group of leaders to nurture, care, train, equip, encourage. Did I say encourage? It could be discourage. You're the encouragement officer. Your goal isn't to be the greatest youth pastor with the greatest, biggest, giantest crowd, but to raise up a team. And so you can't make disciples without small groups. You can't relationships. That your youth effective small group systems. And so if you group both in quality, it takes a team of leaders. I think of Jethro back in Exodus, and Moses and his wife went into Egypt, but somewhere on the way out of Egypt, one more time and took, and she was Moses had arrived to and grandsons back to Moses, and when they get there, they have a great, they're welcomed back, and next day Moses goes to work. Jethro saw Moses. What you're doing is crazy. Loose paraphrase. Like, what you're doing is not good. You're going to wear yourself out, and you're going to wear the. You need to break this up into smaller groups of 10. You need to take your top capable people and make them over 10, and make them over 10, and make them over 10, and make them 50. And as you divide up the people in groups of 10, with even those group leaders and building up, you will be able to be more effective as a leader. Let them deal with the small problems and let the bigger problems work themselves up, and then only you deal with the most severe of issues. And so Moses was able to lead the people by leading leaders of leaders of leaders who led 50s and organized a sharing load. And so groups work is shared shepherd. And as you have a quality team of leaders, you reduce the limits of the growth capacity of your youth group. If your youth group's 20 and you want to reach 40, you need to double your leaders. If you're 40 and you want to reach 100 and not just reach quantity, but invest in going 200 hours. She's like, she was exaggerating and frustrated, but she's like, hey, if a kid fell over and didn't have an ID on them, they wouldn't even know who that kid was. And so we don't want to be that. We don't want to be that. We want to be a place where youth feel cared about, where they feel loved, where somebody listens to them, where somebody knows them. Had a small group. Group leader was Mr. Jerry Hansen, and not only did he teach me the Bible on Wednesday, and we had discussions and we had memorized verses, we bring our friends on Wednesday, Tuesday, the night before, every week he invited my mom, who was a single mom, and my younger brother. The three of us would go to his house and we would eat dinner. It was like the first time I sat around a table and ate instead of eating in front of a TV. And then we would talk. And then after we'd have dinner, me, my brother, and Mr. Hansen would go to the backyard, and we could ask him any question, and we just hang out and talk for like an hour. My mom would be inside talking to his wife, and Mr. Hansen poured into me. He saw his small group as more breakout. He saw it as an opportunity to disciple, to pour into, to love, to care for some young guys that didn't have a father figure. And you know what? That small group impacted my life, but it was because the leader saw it as more than a breakout. He saw a group of disciples that he was pouring into, that he was training, that he was being intentional with, that he was so that he would be. I want to encourage you. Do you see your small group as a hangout, as a worship time, as a teaching community, or do you see it as a group of disciples that you could pour into, that you could spend time with, and that you could help them grow closer to Jesus one step at a time? Next session at Regroup, I'm going to be talking about how you could be more intentional and help grow. But it starts with valuing your small group, valuing the opportunity, seeing it as more than a breakout. God bless you. Love you. Youth small groups are effective when the leaders are well trained and see them as more than a breakout.